I'm Clark, 63 years old, and I spent 31 years building my marine engine restoration business from a small dock workshop here in Wilmington, North Carolina. When my daughter Nova told me not to show up at her college graduation because her boyfriend's parents would be there and I might embarrass her, I smiled and made one phone call. By the time she realized what I'd done, the $185,000 college fund that had been paying her tuition, housing, and sorority fees for 4 years was locked away tighter than the luxury yacht engines I rebuild for millionaire clients. Some lessons about gratitude cost more than a fully restored 1960s Chris Craft. That conversation happened on a Tuesday evening in May. Nova had called me from her apartment near campus, the same apartment I'd been paying $1,350 a month for, plus utilities, plus her car payment, plus her credit card bills that somehow always included expensive dinners and boutique shopping trips I never approved. She was 22 years old, about to graduate magna cum laude from University of North Carolina with a degree I'd been financing since day one, and apparently my presence at her graduation ceremony would be totally awkward because her boyfriend Jackson's family was flying in from Connecticut. "Dad, you just wouldn't mesh well with Jackson's parents," she said, like she was explaining quantum physics to a toddler. "They're really cultured, and Jackson's already mentioned your business thing. Maybe it's better if you just sit this one out and we can celebrate later, just the two of us." My business thing. I specialize in restoring marine engines for luxury yachts, classic boats, and high-end watercraft that cost more than most people's houses. I've worked on engines for Fortune 500 executives, Hollywood celebrities, and European royalty. My workshop on the Cape Fear River has a 2-year waiting list, and my business thing had just paid for her entire college experience without her taking out a single student loan. But apparently getting my hands dirty rebuilding Ferretti yacht engines wasn't cultured enough for Jackson's family from Greenwich. "What about your mother?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Paisley and I had divorced when Nova was 17, and my ex-wife had spent the last 5 years barely managing as a freelance graphic designer while I covered everything for Nova. Tuition, books, housing, food, clothes, car, insurance, cell phone, and whatever else she decided was essential to her college experience. "Mom's definitely coming," Nova said. "Jackson's parents are super excited to meet her. They think it's amazing that she does creative branding for wellness companies. They didn't really ask much about you, though." That's when I understood exactly where I ranked in my daughter's new sophisticated world. I was the silent partner who kept the money flowing, but not someone she wanted associated with her polished college image. Not someone worthy of meeting the parents of the boy she'd been dating for 7 months, the same boy whose emergency spring break expenses I'd unknowingly covered when Nova's credit card statement arrived with $2,400 in Napa Valley charges. I'd been sitting in my home office overlooking the Intracoastal Waterway, surrounded by photos of Nova throughout her childhood. Fishing trips where she'd help me tune boat motors, father-daughter sailing lessons, beach weekends where she'd tell me I was the smartest person she knew. 22 years of being her hero, reduced to an embarrassment she needed to hide from her boyfriend's Connecticut family. "You know what, Nova?" I said, my voice steady as a well-tuned engine. "You're absolutely right. You should celebrate with the people who truly matter to you." She sounded relieved. "Thanks for being so understanding, Dad. I knew you'd get it. How about we do a nice dinner next weekend after everything calms down?" Next weekend, like my daughter's college graduation, was just some scheduling conflict to be handled after her real priorities. After I hung up, I sat in that office for a long time, watching boats pass by on the waterway, thinking about the past 4 years. Every semester I'd wired money for tuition, $32,000 a year, because she absolutely had to attend UNC Chapel Hill instead of the perfectly good state schools that would have cost $20,000 less. Every month, I'd covered her luxury apartment near campus, her premium meal plan, her car payment on the BMW X3 she'd convinced me she needed for safety and reliability, every crisis call about required textbooks that cost $400 each, every networking trip to New York or Miami, every sorority formal that required a new $300 dress, $185,000. That's what I'd invested in her college journey, not counting the BMW, the comprehensive insurance, the unlimited phone plan, the 3 credit cards I'd co-signed that she'd maxed out on organic groceries and yoga studio memberships. And now I was too embarrassing to attend the graduation ceremony that my decades of 12-hour workdays had made possible. I walked to my safe and retrieved the college fund paperwork. The investment account I'd opened the day Nova was born, that I'd been feeding for 22 years, building it through careful investments and relentless work so she could graduate debt-free and launch her adult life with every advantage. The account that listed her as beneficiary but kept me in complete control until her 25th birthday, a decision I'd made to ensure financial responsibility. My phone buzzed. It was my attorney, Preston Williams, returning a voicemail I'd left about estate planning updates. "Preston," I said, "I need to restructure that education trust we established. How fast can we modify the distribution terms?" "That depends on your objectives, Clark. What's prompted this?" "Let's just say my daughter has clarified exactly how she values our relationship. I think it's time my financial planning reflected that same level of honesty." By Thursday afternoon, the college fund that had been bankrolling Nova's entire lifestyle was converted into a restricted trust with ironclad conditions. Nova could still access the money, but only after graduation, 2 years of verified employment, and a written acknowledgement of the sacrifices that funded her education. The automatic monthly transfers covering her apartment, car payment, and credit cards were terminated immediately. Friday night, my phone started lighting up like a Christmas tree. The first call came at 9:47 p.m. Nova's voice was shaky, confused, like she'd just discovered her credit card had been declined at some overpriced Chapel Hill restaurant. "Dad, there's some kind of mistake with my account," she said, trying to sound casual, but I could hear the panic underneath. "My rent payment got rejected, and when I called the bank, they said something about account restrictions. Can you call them tomorrow and fix whatever glitch this is?" I was sitting on my back deck, watching the lights from passing boats reflect off the Cape Fear River, sipping the same brand of bourbon I'd been drinking for 20 years. Nothing fancy, nothing that needed to impress anyone. The kind of simple pleasure that apparently embarrassed my sophisticated daughter. "No glitch, Nova," I said calmly. "I made some changes to your funding arrangements." "What do you mean, changes?" Her voice pitched higher. "Dad, my rent is due Monday, and I have my graduation dinner reservations at Angus Barn tomorrow night. Jackson's parents are expecting something nice. I'm sure they are." I took another sip of bourbon. "Tell me, how much do you think that dinner is going to cost?" "I don't know. Maybe $300 for all of us?" "Dad, what's going on? This isn't funny." $300 for one dinner. I'd grown up eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch every day so my single mother could keep the lights on. I'd worked 16-hour days rebuilding marine engines in the Carolina heat to build the business that had been paying for Nova's gourmet lifestyle, and she thought $300 for one meal was just a casual expense. "Nova, do you have any idea how much money I've spent on your college experience? I mean, I know college is expensive, but that's what parents do, right? You want me to succeed." "Parents want their children to succeed," I agreed. "But they also want their children to appreciate the sacrifices that make success possible. They want their children to value the people who've invested everything in their futures." "Dad, I do appreciate—" "You told me not to come to your graduation because I might embarrass you in front of your boyfriend's parents." Silence. Then, "I didn't mean it like that. I just thought—" "You thought what, Nova? That the man who's been paying for every aspect of your life for the past 4 years wasn't sophisticated enough to sit in the same room as some people from Connecticut. Jackson's dad is a hedge fund manager, and his mom went to Yale, and they're different from us." Different from us. There it was. After 22 years of being her hero, I'd become part of an us that wasn't good enough for her new world. Let me tell you something about different, Nova. Jackson's hedge fund manager father has never rebuilt a 1965 Riva Aquarama from the ground up. He's never taken a seized engine that hadn't run in 20 years and made it purr like new. He's never worked Christmas morning because a client needed his yacht ready for a New Year's cruise. But somehow his money is cleaner than mine. "Dad, that's not what I meant." "Here's what I mean," I interrupted. "The college fund that's been paying for your apartment, your car, your credit cards, your entire lifestyle, it's been restructured. You'll still get the money, but not until you graduate, find a job, keep that job for 2 years, and demonstrate that you understand the value of what I've given you." The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. "You can't do that," she finally whispered. "I have expenses. I have commitments. My lease runs through August. You have a college degree to finish earning. After that, you have an adult life to build. Just like I did when I was your age, except I didn't have anyone paying my bills. But what about my graduation weekend? Jackson's parents can expect whatever they want, but they won't be expecting it on my dime. I heard her crying now, real tears, not the manipulative kind she'd used as a teenager when she wanted something. Dad, please. I'm sorry about what I said. I didn't mean you couldn't come to graduation. I was just nervous about meeting his parents. Nova, this isn't about graduation anymore. This is about 22 years of you taking for granted that I'd always be there, always provide, always sacrifice, and never expecting anything in return except basic respect. Tonight, you made it clear that I don't even have that. I do respect you. You respect my bank account. There's a difference. My phone was buzzing with text messages, probably from her mother, from her friends, maybe even from the sophisticated Jackson whose parents were too cultured to meet a working man who'd financed their son's girlfriend's entire education. The apartment lease you signed without asking me, that's your responsibility now. The BMW payment, yours. The credit cards you maxed out on organic wine and yoga retreats, all yours. Consider it your first lesson in adult financial management. Dad, I can't afford all that on my part-time job at the campus bookstore. Then you better figure it out, fast. Because for the first time in your life, your problems are actually your problems. I stood up from my deck chair, looking out at the boats anchored in the marina. Every one of those vessels represented someone who'd worked hard enough to afford a luxury, someone who understood that respect was earned, not given, someone who knew the difference between appreciating success and being embarrassed by the work that created it. I'll be at your graduation, Nova, I said, in the same clothes I wear to client meetings with millionaire yacht owners, sitting wherever I can find a seat, just like any other proud father. And if that embarrasses you in front of Jackson's hedge fund family, maybe you should think about why you're more comfortable with people who inherited their money than with the man who earned yours. I hung up before she could respond. The next morning brought 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, and 3 voicemails from Nova, each one more desperate than the last. By Saturday afternoon, my phone was buzzing every 10 minutes with messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Paisley called first, of course. My ex-wife's voice was sharp with that familiar tone she'd used during our divorce proceedings, part outrage, part calculation. "Clark, what the hell are you doing to our daughter?" she demanded. "Nova called me sobbing at midnight saying you cut off all her money. This is her graduation weekend." I was in my workshop, hands deep in the engine bay of a 1970 Bertram 31, doing the kind of precise, methodical work that had built everything Nova had taken for granted. The contrast wasn't lost on me. While I was solving complex mechanical problems with decades of experience, my ex-wife was calling to solve her financial problems with guilt and manipulation. "Our daughter told me I was too embarrassing to attend her graduation," I said, not looking up from the engine. "So I decided she should celebrate her independence in every way possible. You can't just abandon her right before graduation. She's barely 22. I'm not abandoning her, Paisley. I'm giving her exactly what she asked for, a life where she doesn't have to be associated with my embarrassing blue-collar success." She didn't mean it that way, and you know it. Actually, I think she meant it exactly that way. 22 years old, and she's ashamed of the man who paid for every advantage she's ever had. That tells me I failed somewhere as a parent. Paisley's voice shifted to the wheedling tone she'd used when she wanted money during our marriage. "Clark, be reasonable. She's young. She made a mistake. Don't punish her for one thoughtless comment." "One thoughtless comment? Paisley, when's the last time Nova called to ask how I'm doing? When's the last time she showed interest in my work, my life, anything beyond the monthly deposits I make to keep her lifestyle afloat?" Silence. Because we both knew the answer. "She loves you," Paisley said weakly. "She loves my financial support. There's a difference, and tonight she made that difference crystal clear." The second call came from someone I didn't expect. Nova's roommate, Willow, a girl I'd met exactly twice during 4 years of paying half their apartment expenses. "Mr. Clark?" Her voice was cautious, like she was approaching a dangerous animal. "Nova asked me to call you. She's pretty upset." "I imagine she is. Look, I know it's not my place, but she really didn't mean what she said about graduation. She's just stressed about meeting Jackson's parents. They're kind of intense." "Intense how?" Willow hesitated. "They asked what her father did for work, and when she told them, Jackson's mom made this face. Like, you know. And then she said something about how interesting it must be to work with your hands. There it was. The sophisticated Connecticut family had looked down on my profession, and instead of defending me, Nova had decided I was the problem. So rather than stand up for the man who's been funding her education, she decided to hide me. She's just trying to fit in, Willow said. Jackson's family has all this money and they make her feel like she has to prove she belongs with them. And apparently I don't help her prove that. Mr. Clark, she's been crying for hours. She keeps saying she's sorry, that she messed up everything. Willow, let me ask you something. In the 4 years you've known Nova, how many times has she talked about appreciating what I do for her? Another long pause. She talks about being grateful. That's not what I asked. I don't know, Mr. Clark. She just always talked like the money was just there, like it was automatic. Automatic. 22 years of 12-hour days, of rebuilding engines in 100-degree heat, of missing social events because I was working to pay for her social events, and she'd come to see my support as automatic, like I was some kind of machine that produced money without effort, without sacrifice, without deserving recognition. Tell Nova that when she's ready to have an honest conversation about respect and appreciation, she can call me. But I won't be bribed back into being her silent ATM with tears and apologies. The third call was the one that really got to me. It came from my neighbor, Chuck Brennan, who ran a successful construction company and whose daughter had graduated from state the year before. Clark, I heard through the grapevine that Nova's having some financial troubles right before graduation. Listen, if you need to borrow some money to help her out, I can. Chuck, stop right there. Come on, man. I know how expensive college is. Sarah's graduation nearly broke me, but it was worth it to see her walk across that stage. This isn't about money, Chuck. This is about my daughter being ashamed of me. Chuck went quiet. He knew me well enough to know I didn't say things lightly. She told me not to come to her graduation because I might embarrass her in front of her boyfriend's parents. After 4 years of paying every bill, covering every expense, making sure she graduated debt-free. Jesus, Clark, that's rough. You know what the funny part is? I've worked on yachts worth more than Jackson's parents make in 5 years. I've had Fortune 500 executives personally thank me for my craftsmanship. But their money came from hedge funds and trust funds, so somehow it's cleaner than mine. Kids don't understand the value of work until they have to do it themselves, Chuck said. Sarah didn't appreciate what I'd sacrificed until she got her first job and realized how hard it is to earn money. Maybe that's the lesson Nova needs to learn. By Sunday morning, the calls had evolved. Now I was getting voicemails from Jackson himself, his voice carrying that entitled tone of someone who'd never been told no. Mr. Clark, this is Jackson Morrison. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding about graduation weekend. Nova's really upset, and honestly, my parents are confused about why there's all this family drama right before what should be a celebration. Family drama. I'd been reduced to family drama in the eyes of a 23-year-old whose parents had probably never worked a physical day in their lives. Look, I don't know what Nova said to upset you, but she's a great girl, and she deserves to have her graduation weekend go smoothly. My parents have already made restaurant reservations and hotel bookings, and it would be really awkward if Nova couldn't participate because of some financial issue. The entitlement was breathtaking. This kid thought my daughter's financial crisis was an inconvenience for his family's social plans, but the final message was the one that told me everything I needed to know. It came Monday morning, just as Nova should have been walking across the stage to receive the diploma I'd paid for. The final message came Monday morning from Nova herself, but her voice was different, harder, colder, filled with a rage I'd never heard before. You know what, Dad? Fine. You win. You've completely ruined the most important weekend of my life, but congratulations, you've made your point. Her words came fast, bitter. Jackson's parents think I'm some kind of charity case now. His mom actually asked if my family was going through financial difficulties and suggested I might want to reconsider my relationship with their son if I couldn't maintain a certain lifestyle. I was driving to the marina, heading for a client meeting about $1 million yacht restoration, when her voicemail played through my truck's speakers. The morning sun was reflecting off the Cape Fear River, and for a moment I thought about all those Saturday mornings when Nova was little, when she'd ride with me to the workshop and help organize my tools while I worked. I had to explain to everyone why my father wasn't at graduation. Do you know how humiliating that was? Rebecca's parents flew in from Seattle. Willow's whole family was there. Even kids whose parents are divorced had both parents show up. But not me. I had to tell everyone that my dad was busy with work because I couldn't admit that you were punishing me like I'm some kind of child. The irony was devastating. She was angry that I'd treated her like a child, but she'd never stopped taking my money like one. And here's the really great part, she continued, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Jackson broke up with me, yesterday, right after his parents told him they thought his girlfriend came from an unstable family situation. Apparently, fathers who abandon their daughters at important moments aren't the kind of in-laws the Morrison family wants. I pulled into the marina parking lot and sat there for a moment, engine running, processing what I'd just heard. The boyfriend she'd been so desperate to impress, whose parents she'd wanted to protect from my embarrassing presence, had dumped her the moment things got complicated. So thanks, Dad. Thanks for teaching me that the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally will throw you away the moment you don't meet their expectations. Jackson learned that lesson from you. Her voice cracked slightly, and for a second I heard the little girl who used to fall asleep in my lap while I watched football on Sunday afternoons. I graduate in 3 hours, magna cum laude, just like I promised I would. And I'll be sitting there thinking about how the person who made it all possible decided that proving a point was more important than being proud of his daughter. The voicemail ended, and I sat there staring out at the boats bobbing in their slips, each one representing someone else's dream that I'd helped restore. Engines that had been broken, forgotten, written off as worthless, brought back to life through patience and skill and understanding their true value. My phone rang. It was my client, Harrison Webb, the pharmaceutical executive whose 1963 Chris-Craft I'd been restoring for 8 months. "Clark, I'm running a few minutes late," he said. "But I wanted to tell you, I drove by yesterday and saw her in the water. She's absolutely beautiful. You've brought her back to life." "She was worth saving," I said automatically, the words I always used when clients saw their restored boats for the first time. "You know, my son graduated from Duke last weekend. Business degree, magna cum laude. I kept thinking during the ceremony about all the sacrifices my wife and I made to get him there. The long hours, the missed vacations, the careful budgeting. But seeing him walk across that stage made every sacrifice worth it." I closed my eyes. Harrison's words felt like salt in a wound I was still figuring out how to bandage. "Clark, you still there?" "Yeah, Harrison, I'm here. Everything all right? You sound distracted." I thought about telling him, about explaining that my own daughter had just graduated magna cum laude while I sat in a parking lot, listening to her blame me for ruining the most important day of her life. About how the young man she'd wanted to protect from my embarrassing presence had abandoned her the moment she needed support. Instead, I said, "Just thinking about restoration projects. Sometimes you have to tear something down completely before you can build it back up properly." "That's true," Harrison agreed, "but the end result is always stronger than the original." As I hung up and walked toward the marina, I wondered if that would be true for Nova and me, or if some things were too broken to restore. 3 weeks passed before Nova called again. I'd spent those weeks working on Harrison's Chris-Craft, losing myself in the precise, methodical process of rebuilding something that had been neglected for decades. There's something therapeutic about taking apart an engine that's been seized with rust and corrosion, understanding why it failed, and carefully bringing each component back to life. My phone rang on a Tuesday evening while I was adjusting the carburetor settings. Nova's number appeared on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail. I'd learned that immediate responses to her crises only enabled the pattern we'd been locked in for 4 years. When I finally listened to the message an hour later, her voice was different again. Not angry this time, not manipulative, but tired. Defeated. "Dad, it's me. I know you probably don't want to talk to me right now, but I need to tell you some things. I got a job. Well, sort of. It's at a marina restaurant in Wrightsville Beach, waiting tables, minimum wage plus tips. The manager said I could work double shifts if I wanted, so I'm pulling 60 hours a week trying to cover my rent and car payment." I paused the message and walked outside to my deck. The summer heat was oppressive, the kind of humidity that made every breath feel thick. The same conditions I'd worked in for 30 years, rebuilding engines in warehouses with no air conditioning because that's what it took to build something lasting. I resumed the message. My hands are covered in cuts from carrying heavy trays, and I smell like fried seafood every night when I get home. Yesterday, a customer complained that I was too slow bringing their drinks, and my manager made me apologize in front of the whole restaurant. I stood there with my college degree saying sorry for not being fast enough with someone's beer. There was a long pause, and I could hear the exhaustion in her breathing. I keep thinking about what you used to tell me when I was little, about how work shapes character. I never understood what you meant. I thought character was something you just had, like eye color or height. I didn't realize it was something you had to build. Another pause. The other servers are mostly local kids who didn't go to college. They work 2 or 3 jobs, send money home to help their families, and they never complain. There's this girl, Melody. She's 19 and supports her mom and little brother because her dad left when she was in high school. She makes more in tips than I do because she actually understands how to work hard, how to make people feel valued. I found myself nodding, thinking about all the young people I'd employed over the years who understood that respect was earned through effort, not given because of degrees or family background. I called Mom last week, thinking she might lend me some money to get caught up on bills. She laughed and said maybe this would teach me to appreciate you more. Then she told me she's dating some guy who owns a CrossFit gym and they're planning a trip to Costa Rica with the money she saved by not helping me. The bitterness in Nova's voice reminded me of my own feelings when I'd realized that Paisley's concern for our daughter only extended as far as it didn't inconvenience her new lifestyle. Jackson texted me yesterday, just to let me know he's dating someone else now, a girl whose father owns a chain of luxury car dealerships in Connecticut. He said he hoped I was figuring things out and that maybe we could be friends someday. Friends. After I restructured my entire personality to try to fit into his world. I walked to the railing and looked out at the boats in the marina. A young couple was cleaning their small sailboat, working together in the evening light, taking pride in maintaining something they'd obviously saved up to buy. Real partnership, built on mutual respect and shared effort. Dad, I know you're probably waiting for me to say I'm sorry, and I am. But not just sorry for what I said about graduation. I'm sorry for 22 years of taking you for granted. I'm sorry for never asking about your work except when I needed money. I'm sorry for being embarrassed by the thing that made everything else possible. Her voice broke slightly. I'm sorry for not understanding that while I was worried about impressing people who judge others by their job titles, I was disrespecting the one person who'd actually earned the right to be proud. I closed my eyes, remembering all those years when she'd been genuinely interested in my work, before college, before social status became more important than substance, when she'd thought rebuilding engines was the coolest thing in the world because her dad could make broken things work again. I don't expect you to fix this for me, she continued. I don't expect money or loans or bailouts. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand why you did what you did. And I wanted to ask, would it be okay if I came by this weekend? Not to ask for anything, just to see you. Maybe you could show me some of the projects you're working on, like you used to when I was little. The message ended, and I stood there on my deck for a long time, watching the sun set over the Cape Fear River. For the first time in months, I felt something other than disappointment when I thought about my daughter. But understanding and earning trust back were 2 different things. Nova was about to learn that some repairs take more than good intentions. They take consistent, patient work over time. Saturday morning, Nova's Honda CR-V pulled into my driveway at exactly 9 o'clock. Through my kitchen window, I watched her sit in the car for several minutes before getting out, like she was gathering courage for a job interview. When she finally emerged, I barely recognized her. The girl who'd spent 4 years in designer jeans and sorority sweatshirts was wearing faded khakis and a wrinkled polo shirt with Captain Bill's Seafood embroidered on the chest. Her hands, which used to be perfectly manicured for social media photos, were raw and cut from restaurant work. She looked like she'd lost 15 pounds, and not in a healthy way. I opened the front door before she could knock. Dad. Nova. We stood there for a moment, 2 people who'd once been inseparable, trying to figure out how to navigate the distance that had grown between us. She looked younger somehow, stripped of the confident facade she'd worn throughout college. Thank you for letting me come over, she said quietly. I stepped aside to let her in. She paused in the entryway, looking around at the house that had been her safe haven for 18 years before college taught her to see it as embarrassing. Coffee? I offered. Please. In the kitchen, I poured 2 cups from the pot I'd made earlier. Black for me, cream and sugar for her. Some things don't change, even when everything else does. She wrapped her hands around the mug like she was trying to warm herself despite the summer heat. I worked until midnight last night, she said. Private party on a yacht at the marina. Rich people celebrating some business deal, ordering bottle after bottle of champagne that cost more than I make in a week. I waited, saying nothing. The boat was beautiful, a Bertram, I think. White with blue trim. I kept thinking about how you always told me about the boats you worked on, but I never really listened. I was too busy thinking about other things. 1985 Bertram 46, I said. Restored her engine 3 years ago. Twin Caterpillar diesels. Nova looked surprised. You know that boat? I know most of the boats at Wrightsville Marina. Kind of goes with the territory. She stared into her coffee. The owner was there last night. Mr. Davidson. When he found out I was Clark Morrison's daughter, he stopped everything to talk to me. He told everyone at the table that you were a master craftsman and that his boat had never run better. I remembered Davidson, pharmaceutical executive, nice guy who understood quality work and paid promptly. He said I should be proud to have a father with your reputation. Nova's voice was barely above a whisper. And I just stood there, realizing that a stranger respected you more than I ever showed. The silence stretched between us. Outside I could hear the sound of someone working on their boat in the marina, the familiar rhythm of maintenance that keeps things running smoothly. I've been thinking a lot about that day you taught me to change the oil in my car, Nova said suddenly. I was 16, and I complained the whole time about getting dirty. You said knowing how to maintain something was the first step to appreciating its value. I remembered. She'd been more interested in her phone than learning, but I'd insisted she understand the basics of caring for something she depended on. I never changed the oil again after that, she admitted. Just took it to the shop and charged it to the credit card you paid. I never maintained anything in my life because I never had to. Everything was just taken care of. She set down her coffee cup and looked directly at me for the first time since arriving. Dad, I know I can't undo the things I said or the way I acted. I know saying sorry doesn't fix 4 years of taking you for granted. But I want to learn. I want to understand what you tried to teach me about work, about respect, about appreciating what we have. I studied my daughter's face, looking for signs of the manipulation I'd grown accustomed to. But all I saw was exhaustion and something that looked like genuine humility. Understanding is just the first step, Nova. Changing behavior takes time and consistency. Like rebuilding an engine, you can't just apologize to the broken parts and expect them to work again. She nodded. I know, but I'm willing to do the work, if you'll let me try. I stood up from the table. Come on then, let me show you what I'm working on. I led Nova through the house toward the back door, past the family photos that chronicled her childhood. Pictures of us at boat shows, her first fishing trip, the day she'd helped me rebuild a small outboard motor by handing me the wrong tools with absolute confidence. She paused at one photo, her at age 12, grinning while wearing my 2 big safety glasses in the workshop. I remember that day, she said softly. You were working on that old Sea Ray, and I kept asking a million questions about how engines worked. You wanted to know why the pistons went up and down instead of sideways, I recalled. Spent an hour drawing diagrams on the whiteboard. And I acted like I was bored, but I kept all those drawings in my room for years. We walked across the back deck and down the path to my workshop. The building sat right on the waterway, a 4,000 square foot facility I designed specifically for marine engine restoration. The overhead doors were open to catch the morning breeze, and sunlight streamed across the concrete floor where Harrison Webb's 1963 Chris Craft sat on a custom trailer. Nova stopped in her tracks when she saw the boat. My God, Dad, she's gorgeous. The Chris Craft gleamed in the morning light, her mahogany hull restored to mirror-like perfection, chrome fittings polished until they looked brand new. But it was the engine bay that really showcased the work. Twin Chrysler V8s that looked like mechanical jewelry, every component rebuilt and detailed to factory specifications. 18 months of work, I said, running my hand along the engine block. Owner found her rotting in a barn upstate. Engine hadn't run in 30 years. Hull was split in 3 places. Interior was completely destroyed by mice. Nova walked around the boat slowly, taking in every detail. How do you even know where to start with something this damaged? Same way you start any restoration, you assess what's salvageable and what needs to be replaced. You research the original specifications. Then you work systematically, one component at a time, until everything functions the way it was designed to. She nodded, and I could see her understanding the parallel I was drawing. The hardest part isn't the mechanical work, I continued. It's having patience when progress seems slow, and faith that the end result will be worth the effort. Nova climbed up on the trailer to get a better look at the engine bay. These motors are incredible. They look like art. Function and beauty aren't mutually exclusive. The engineers who designed these engines in 1963 understood that something could be both powerful and elegant. They took pride in their work because they knew people would see it, depend on it, judge them by it. I opened the toolbox and pulled out a torque wrench, checking the head bolt specifications one final time before Harrison's pickup test next week. Nova, when you were embarrassed to have me at graduation, what exactly were you embarrassed about? She was quiet for a long moment, studying the engine components. I thought your work was beneath what I'd become. College taught me to value degrees and titles and office jobs. I started thinking that working with your hands meant you weren't smart enough for real work. And now? Now I realize that rebuilding something like this requires more knowledge than most people accumulate in their entire careers. Engineering, metallurgy, electrical systems, hydraulics, woodworking, finishing. You're like a mechanical surgeon. I moved to the starboard engine and began checking the timing. But that's not really why you were embarrassed, is it? Nova climbed down from the trailer and leaned against the workbench. No. I was embarrassed because your success didn't come with the right credentials. Jackson's dad went to Harvard Business School and manages other people's money. You went to community college and create things with your hands. In my college world, his way was more prestigious. Even though this restoration will sell for $400,000, and the skills that made it possible can't be learned in any classroom. Even though, she admitted, I got brainwashed into thinking that clean hands meant clean money, and clean money meant respectability. I set down my tools and looked at my daughter. Nova, every bolt in these engines was torqued to exact specifications. Every wire was routed precisely. Every surface was finished to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. That level of precision requires intelligence, experience, and craftsmanship that most people never develop. She nodded, tears starting to form in her eyes. But more than that, I continued, this work creates something lasting, something beautiful, something that brings joy to families for generations. When Harrison takes his grandkids out on this boat next summer, my work becomes part of their memories. While Jackson's dad shuffles numbers in spreadsheets that nobody will remember in 5 years. I'm not criticizing his work, Nova. I'm just saying that all honest work has dignity, whether it's done in an office or a workshop. The problem isn't what people do. It's when they start thinking their work makes them better than someone else's. Nova wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I became one of those people, didn't I? For a while. But recognition is the first step toward change. We worked together for the next 3 hours, and I watched Nova transform before my eyes. Not back into the eager 12-year-old who'd asked endless questions, but into something new, a young woman discovering that competence and respect had to be earned, not inherited. I started her on simple tasks, organizing tools, cleaning parts, checking fluid levels. She approached each job with the same intensity she'd once reserved for sorority rush and Dean's List achievements, but now her focus carried weight. When she dropped a wrench and it clanged against the concrete floor, she winced like she'd damaged something precious. In the restaurant, she said, polishing a chrome fitting until it gleamed. When I mess up an order or move too slowly, people treat me like I'm disposable, like I don't matter. But this work, every detail matters, doesn't it? Every detail, I confirmed, watching her carefully clean grease from the threads of a bolt. In marine engines, shortcuts kill. A loose fitting at the wrong time means someone's stranded 20 miles offshore, maybe in rough weather. People trust their lives to this work. She paused, bolt in hand. People trusted their daughter's future to your work too. And I treated that trust like it was worthless. Around noon, Harrison Webb arrived for his scheduled inspection. I'd called him earlier to mention that my daughter would be assisting, partly as a test for Nova. Would she be embarrassed to be seen doing manual work, or had something fundamental shifted? Harrison was exactly the kind of man Nova had been trying to impress through Jackson's family. Harvard MBA, pharmaceutical executive, member of the country club. But unlike the Morrison family from Connecticut, Harrison had built his success through decades of intelligent decisions and hard work. He understood value. "Clark, she's absolutely magnificent," Harrison said, walking slowly around the Chris craft. "I can't believe this is the same boat I pulled out of that barn." "Nova's been helping with the final detailing," I said, gesturing to my daughter, who was still wearing her work clothes and had grease under her fingernails. Instead of embarrassment, I saw Nova straighten with something that looked like pride. "Mr. Webb, your boat has the most beautiful engines I've ever seen," she said. "My father spent 18 months making sure every component was perfect." Harrison smiled. "You know, Nova, I've restored classic cars as a hobby for 20 years, but I wouldn't dare attempt something this complex. Your father's craftsmanship is extraordinary. There aren't a dozen people in the country who could have brought this boat back to life." "I'm starting to understand that," Nova replied. "I spent 4 years in college learning about business theories, but I never learned how to actually create anything valuable." "Education has many forms," Harrison said diplomatically. "But there's something special about work that creates beauty and function simultaneously. Your father's reputation in the marine community is legendary." After Harrison left, promising to return the following week for the water test, Nova and I sat on the deck overlooking the marina. She was quiet, processing what she'd experienced. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Anything. When you cut off my funding, were you punishing me or teaching me?" I considered the question carefully. "Both, I think. The punishment was for the disrespect, the entitlement, the way you'd started treating our relationship like a business transaction. But the teaching, that was about helping you discover who you really are when everything isn't handed to you. It's been the hardest 3 weeks of my life," she said, "but also the most honest. When I have to work for every dollar, when I can't buy my way out of problems, when I have to earn respect instead of expecting it, I'm finding out things about myself I never knew. Such as, I'm stronger than I thought, and I was weaker than I wanted to admit." She pulled her knees up to her chest. "All those years, I thought your support was just automatic, like a trust fund or inheritance. I never connected the dots between your work and my lifestyle." The sun was starting to set over the Cape Fear River, painting the water in shades of gold and orange. Boats were returning to the marina after a day on the water. Families who'd made memories possible because someone like me had made sure their engines ran safely and reliably. "Dad, I want to ask you something, but I'm afraid you'll say no." "Ask anyway." She took a deep breath. "Would you consider letting me work here? Not for money from the college fund. I'm not ready for that yet. But for wages, like a real employee. I want to learn this business, understand what you've built, maybe find out if I have any of your talent." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her for the first time in months. The entitled college student was gone, replaced by someone who'd tasted real work and found she didn't hate it. "It's not easy work, Nova. It's hot, dirty, physically demanding. There's no social status in it, no prestige to impress anyone with." "I don't want to impress anyone anymore," she said firmly. "I want to build something real, something that matters, something that would make you proud." For the first time since graduation weekend, I smiled at my daughter. "Be here Monday at 7 a.m. Bring work clothes you don't mind ruining, and prepare to start at the very bottom. If you're serious about this, you'll earn your place here the same way I earned mine, through dedication, skill, and proving your worth every single day." Nova's face lit up with the first genuine happiness I'd seen from her in years. 6 months later, Nova had become indispensable to Morrison Marine Restoration, not because she was my daughter, but because she developed into the kind of employee I'd always hoped to find. Meticulous, eager to learn, and driven by genuine pride in quality work. She started that first Monday exactly where I'd started 31 years earlier, sweeping floors, organizing parts, and watching everything with hungry eyes. By week 3, she was cleaning engine components to specifications that met my standards. By month 2, she was troubleshooting electrical systems under my supervision. Now, she could rebuild a carburetor faster than technicians with 5 years of experience. The transformation wasn't just professional. The entitled college graduate had been replaced by someone who understood that respect was earned through competence, not demanded through status. She arrived early, stayed late, and approached every task like her reputation depended on it, because it did. "Check the timing on the port engine," I called across the shop where Nova was working on a 1968 cigarette racing boat. The owner was a hedge fund manager from New York, the same type of person she'd once been desperate to impress. Already done, she replied, wiping her hands on a rag. Advancing the timing 2 degrees improved the power curve by 12%. The owner's going to love how she runs. The client arrived that afternoon for his final inspection. Richard Steinberg was exactly the kind of Wall Street executive Nova had once thought represented success. Armani suit, Rolex watch, the casual arrogance of someone accustomed to buying solutions to every problem. "Morrison, this boat is spectacular," Steinberg said, examining the pristine engine bay. "But I'm concerned about long-term reliability. What kind of warranty do you provide on this level of restoration?" 5 years, full coverage, I said. "But you're not just getting a warranty on the work. You're getting Nova's personal commitment to excellence." Steinberg looked skeptical. "Your daughter? She's what, 22? I'm spending $200,000 on this restoration." Nova stepped forward, engine grease still under her fingernails, confidence evident in her posture. "Mr. Steinberg, I personally rebuilt every component in both engines. The compression ratios are within 1% of factory specifications across all cylinders. The fuel delivery system has been upgraded with modern components that exceed original performance standards. This boat will outrun anything in your marina and do it reliably for decades." Steinberg's expression shifted as Nova continued, discussing technical details with the expertise of someone who'd earned her knowledge through hands-on experience rather than theoretical study. "When you're running wide open at 70 miles per hour, 20 miles offshore, you need to trust the person who built your engines," Nova said. "I stake my reputation on every bolt I tighten, every wire I route, every system I calibrate. That's the Morrison guarantee." After Steinberg left, satisfied and impressed, Nova and I cleaned up the shop together, the same ritual that ended every workday. "He reminded me of Jackson's father," she said, coiling an air hose with the precision I'd taught her. 6 months ago, I would have been intimidated by someone like that. Now I realize he needs what we provide more than we need his approval." "What changed?" "I learned the difference between having money and creating value. Steinberg can write checks, but he can't rebuild a cigarette racing engine. He needs people like us, even if he doesn't always show it." We locked up the shop and walked toward the house. The marina was quiet in the evening light, boats rocking gently at their slips, the peaceful end to another productive day. "Dad, I need to tell you something," Nova said as we reached the deck. I waited, wondering if this was leading toward a request for early access to the college fund. She'd proven herself professionally, but I wanted to be sure the lessons had truly taken hold. "I've been thinking about the future, about what I want to build with my life," she continued. "I'd like to propose a partnership, Morrison and Daughter Marine Restoration. Not because I'm your daughter, but because I've earned the right to have my name on the sign." She pulled a folded document from her pocket. "I've put together a business plan, expansion into classic yacht restoration, maybe taking on some of the high-end projects that you've had to turn down because of capacity limits. I want to invest my own money, the money I've earned here, to help grow what you built." I unfolded the papers, scanning financial projections, market analysis, and growth strategies that demonstrated both ambition and realistic understanding of the business. "Partnership means equal responsibility, Nova, equal accountability, no safety net because you're family." "I wouldn't want it any other way," she said firmly. "I've learned that the best safety net is being so good at what you do that people can't afford to lose you." 2 years later, Morrison and Daughter Marine Restoration had expanded into a 8,000 square foot facility with 12 employees and a waiting list that stretched 18 months. Nova had proven herself not just as a skilled technician, but as a business partner who understood that sustainable growth came through reputation, not shortcuts. The college fund sat untouched in its restructured trust, earning interest while Nova built her own financial independence. She'd never asked for early access, never suggested that her proven transformation entitled her to the money. Instead, she'd opened her own savings account, contributed to her own 401k, and purchased a small house 3 miles from the marina with money she'd earned through competence and dedication. Today was special, though. Harrison Webb was returning with his Chris Craft for its annual maintenance, the boat that had been the backdrop for Nova's first real lesson about the dignity of skilled work. But he wasn't alone. "Clark, Nova, I'd like you to meet my son Michael," Harrison said, introducing a well-dressed young man about Nova's age. "He just graduated from Duke Business School, and he's been asking about your operation ever since I told him about the partnership." Michael Webb had the polished confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. But unlike Jackson Morrison, his interest seemed genuine rather than condescending. "Mr. Morrison, Ms. Morrison, my father talks about your work constantly," Michael said. "He says you've created something special here, combining traditional craftsmanship with modern business practices." Nova stepped forward, no longer the girl who needed validation from wealthy families, but a professional who'd earned her place through demonstrated expertise. "We focus on restoration projects that other shops won't attempt," she explained, gesturing toward the Chris craft. "Boats like your father's require understanding both the original engineering and modern improvements that enhance performance, without compromising authenticity." As Nova walked Michael through the facility, explaining our processes and showing examples of completed restorations, I felt something I hadn't experienced since she was a child: uncomplicated pride in who she'd become. The conversation turned to business philosophy, and Nova articulated principles that I'd tried to teach her for years, but that she'd only understood through earning them herself. "Success in this industry isn't about volume," she told Michael. "It's about reputation. Every boat that leaves here carries our name into the marine community. We succeed when our clients trust us with their most prized possessions and recommend us to others who share that passion for excellence." Later that evening, after the Webbs had left and we'd secured the shop for the night, Nova and I sat on the deck overlooking the Cape Fear River, the same spot where she'd first apologized and asked to learn the business, where she'd proven that apologies mean nothing without changed behavior. "Dad, I got a call today that I want to discuss with you," she said, her tone serious but not worried. "Everything okay?" "Better than okay. Remember the Steinberg cigarette boat we restored last year? He's been talking about our work in his circles. Today I got a call from someone who owns a 1955 Chris Craft Constellation, a 57-footer that's been sitting in a barn in Virginia for 30 years. I whistled softly. A Constellation restoration would be the kind of project that established legends in the marine community. 6 months of work, $300,000 in revenue, and a result that would be featured in every classic boat magazine in the country. The owner wants to meet with us next week. If we get the contract, it would be the biggest project in the company's history. That's incredible, Nova. You should be proud. I am proud, but I'm also thinking about something bigger. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I want to propose something, and I need you to know it's not about the college fund or family obligations. It's about business. I waited, curious where this was leading. I'd like to buy out your share of the company over the next 5 years. Not because I want you to retire, but because I want to prove I can carry the Morrison name forward independently. You built something amazing here, and I want the responsibility of maintaining that legacy. The proposition surprised me. Nova had become such an integral part of the operation that I'd assumed we'd continue as partners indefinitely. You'd keep me on as senior craftsman and chief restoration specialist, she continued. But the business decisions, the growth strategies, the financial responsibility, I want that to be mine. I want to earn ownership the same way you earned everything else. I looked out at the marina, at boats whose engines I'd restored, whose owners trusted me with their dreams and memories. The work would continue, but under Nova's leadership, it would evolve into something even better. The college fund, I said. You've never asked for it. Because I don't need it anymore. I learned something more valuable than money. I learned how to create value through skill, dedication, and integrity. The fund can stay in trust for the grandchildren you'll hopefully have someday. I'd rather build my own legacy than inherit yours. 3 weeks later, we signed the papers. Morrison and Daughter Marine Restoration became Morrison Marine Restoration under new management, with Nova as owner and me as lead craftsman. The transition that began with a painful lesson about respect and appreciation had evolved into something neither of us had planned, but both of us had earned. Sometimes the most important inheritance isn't money. It's the knowledge that you're capable of building something meaningful with your own hands, your own intelligence, and your own character. And sometimes the greatest gift a parent can give isn't what they provide, but what they refuse to provide until it's truly deserved.